Good morning. So we come to our final session for this retreat. So let's recap looking at the 4 clingings that we are to part from. So the first we looked at was that of clinging to this life. So clinging to this life refers to clinging to things such as our various relationships, possessions, and so forth, a reputation, and so forth, and seeing these as a source of happiness worthy of striving for. But the reality is, the happiness we desire can never be attained by what we believe actually can do so. So we need to reflect that these are not sources of lasting happiness. And moreover, this life, which will end, we will need to leave everything behind. Our dearest friends, our most beloved family members, our most cherished possessions, all will have to be left behind. All that we can take with us are the imprints that we acquired in this life, the negative imprints that we acquired in order to gain things for this life, as well as virtuous imprints. Those imprints alone are what will accompany us to our next life. So here the meditation is first to come to recognize the actual situation that we find ourselves in as presented, and then as an antidote to this, to gain a perspective that is more in accordance with reality, we need to reflect on impermanence. And this reflection on impermanence is the foundational meditation for someone who longs to cultivate paths within, recognizing that all that we grasp at so, cling at so, is impermanent. Therefore, it cannot lead to the happiness we desire. Moreover, this life that we cling to so, this body that we value so, this too is impermanent. It will have to be left behind. This whole precious environment we have created for ourselves will be left behind. So we meditate on both the impermanence of this life and impermanence in general. And that serves to enable us to lift our gaze beyond the pleasures of this life to looking at the stream of lives that lie ahead of us and see them as of more importance. In this way, we let go of this life's troubles and concerns, this life's pleasures and problems, seeing them as insignificant compared to the stream of lives before us. Then we can focus on accumulating the causes that are required to ensure excellent rebirths for lifetimes to come. These are ethical restraint, where one commits to bringing no harm to others, to keep one's physical behavior within the confines of what's ethical, one's speech within the confines of what is ethical, and even one's mind. So through our body, speech, and mind, we commit to bringing no harm. Secondly, that of generosity. Not only do we commit to not bringing harm, we commit to being of benefit in accordance with our capacity wherever we can, whether through material support or giving up our time, friendship, sharing our skills, and so forth. Third training is that of patience, because the reality is, whilst trying to interact with others in a way that doesn't cause harm, they may well respond to us in ways that we find uncomfortable. So here the practice of patience is ensuring the mind stays undisturbed in the face of adversity from others, as well as adversity we may feel when practicing generosity, for example. Others may want to take advantage of us, take us for granted. Again, patience is by keeping the mind undisturbed. And then fourthly, that of enthusiastic perseverance. Intentionally generate delight in the virtue that one is engaging. So these are the 4 causes to cultivate in order to gain a stream of excellent rebirths. This training thus presented to abandon clinging to this life is the indispensable foundation upon which one can build the qualities that follow, the qualities that are thereafter required. This foundational practice of meditating on impermanence gives one the strength of mind, the focus to let go of what dominates us, dominates our mental and physical activity, enabling us to have the strength of mind to cultivate the great qualities that are required for liberation and enlightenment. So, with such a foundation of reflecting well on impermanence and seeing the trials and tribulations of this life in their truer light, one is then ready to build on this and look at the second clinging that is to be abandoned, and that is to the three realms of samsara. So to abandon our clinging for the three realms of samsara, one needs to come to gain a realistic understanding of the realms of samsara. So in the prior meditation, one has done so in relation to this life. Now we need to expand it to gain complete clarity that nowhere in the human, in a rebirth as a human or as a god, is there a state of lasting happiness. There's nothing worthy of striving for that within the realms of samsara that will fulfill our wishes, that will lead us, that will fulfill our yearning for happiness. So this is done through meditating on the sufferings of samsara. Here the presentations are varied, and I mentioned some of them. Reflect on the suffering of physical and mental pain, the suffering of transient happiness, and the suffering of all-pervasive conditioning, as well as meditating on meeting the unwanted, being separated from the wanted, not getting what you want, as well as insatiability and uncertainty. So these are a number of ways in which to come to recognize our actual reality, that there is, despite yearning for happiness, there is no lasting happiness to be found as long as we remain bound in cyclic existence. So this then leads us to develop a disenchantment for cyclic existence entirely. And just like with the foundational meditation one previously presented, there one gains a disenchantment with striving for this life's pleasures. Here, one gains a disenchantment for striving for any result in samsara. And just like with the foundational meditation, where the result was not just disenchantment, but a positive looking to the future, to lives beyond this, here too, with abandoning the second clinging, there is a disenchantment, a rejection, but also a positive embrace of what is possible, the attainment of liberation from samsara, complete cessation of suffering, liberation from the suffering realms of samsara in their entirety. And this is the mind of definite emergence, or more commonly translated as renunciation, where what one is renouncing is the causes of suffering. And one is embracing the causes of happiness, which will lead to lasting happiness of liberation. So those causes of happiness are the same four that were presented in the previous segment, but now with a motivation, now conjoined with the motivation of definite emergence. So these are generosity, ethical restraint, patience, and enthusiastic perseverance. And the two additional trainings of single-pointed concentration and the wisdom realizing selflessness. So these 6 trainings conjoined with the motivation of definite emergence. So the first line, which we looked at on Friday, this is from the presentation in the Lamrim, are the trainings or the practices shared with the practitioner of initial capacity. And then the second line, what I've just recapped from the Lamrim presentation, is the training shared with the practitioner of intermediate capacity. And then the third line that we looked at yesterday, these, from the Lamrim perspective, are the trainings that are unique to a practitioner of great capacity. So with all 3 of these trainings, one comes about independence on the successful cultivation of the prior training. Moreover, each training has the aspect of rejecting something, striving for the pleasures of this life, or striving for the pleasures that are still bound anywhere in samsara, as well as they have a aspect of a striving for something new, of something positive, excellent rebirths in future lives, liberation from samsara. So both a rejection and an embrace. Now too, as we move independence on the successful training in these now 2 foundational practices, one is ready to move to the third training. And here, or the third level, here one now has a very vivid understanding of the pervasiveness of suffering in cyclic existence. One no longer is deceived by the so-called pleasures of samsara, thinking that they are worth my effort. And this means one has rejected cyclic existence and is striving in those 6 causes to gain liberation. Now one lifts one's gaze yet further, recognizing that I want to be happy, and I now know how to gain lasting happiness. I am striving to cultivate these causes. This puts me in quite a unique position in our world, because what I have in common with all other beings is this yearning for happiness. But so few are in the position that I am in, having come to recognize the pervasiveness of suffering and its causes and how to gain freedom. And I'm actually striving for this. I'm incredibly fortunate. How can I continue to strive for my own welfare alone and leave all other beings behind? How can this be appropriate? So as we move to the third step, hopefully it's abundantly clear how this has come about independence on the second, and hopefully it is also abundantly clear how that only comes about independence on the prior training in the first. So here, one now builds on this burgeoning sense of responsibility to others by first developing affectionate love for all others. And this is done through the meditation on recognizing our deeply interdependent relationship with others. How all that we have and enjoy and that has brought benefit to us has come about not through our own heroic efforts, but in dependence on the kindness of others, where they have directly as well as indirectly helped me in countless ways since beginningless time. We use this to reflecting deeply here on interdependence to develop a tender, affectionate love for others. Thereafter, based on that, we develop into the actual love of the Dharma. The wish, may all beings attain lasting happiness. May they abide in lasting happiness. And this is followed by the companion mind of compassion. May all beings be freed of suffering and its causes. And we develop love and compassion in this way so that this yearning becomes so powerful within that we are no longer satisfied with merely wanting this to happen, but we are going to make it happen. We take individual responsibility for the welfare, not just of myself, but of each and every single mother sentient being without exception. We take it as our responsibility to ensure each being is guided so that they gain liberation from suffering in the same way that I am progressing. This is my responsibility, and this is the mind of wholehearted resolve. Then, one further wish is added to that. As I lack the capacity to do so, I have to become a Buddha. It's only as a Buddha will I have the skill to be able to lead all beings to enlightenment. So here one generates bodhicitta, these 2 wishes of wanting to lead all beings to a state freed of suffering, and to do so, I must become a Buddha. So that's as far as we came to yesterday, the cultivation of bodhicitta. In the third line, if you cling to self-interest, you're not a bodhisattva. So I hope it's abundantly clear that there is a progression in training, that the later developments come about in dependence on the successful cultivation of the prior trainings. There is a specific sequence. And for those who have 2 aspects, firstly, the aspiration to develop the higher qualities of the path, and they have some time, then the way to train to develop those higher qualities is to cultivate excellently the prior trainings and move through the sequence. So for those who have aspiration for the higher qualities and have the time to go through the whole sequence, make great efforts where you are. And for most, this will be to train in the first line, so as to develop the strength of mind required to engage in the second level. Because the trainings you would have heard differ in terms of the motivation to be cultivated, where one is looking, or what one is looking to reject. The distraction to this life's meaningless pleasures, the distraction to striving for anywhere in cyclic existence, maybe distraction is not the right word, but the self-interest in the third level, that is all to be abandoned. So there's difference. But where it's very similar is in terms of what is conjoined to that motivation. So for the training of the being of initial capacity, the first level, there it's ethics, generosity, patience, and enthusiastic perseverance. Then when one comes to the training of a practitioner of intermediate capacity, it's the same four trainings: ethics, generosity, ethics, patience, enthusiastic perseverance, and then 2 additional trainings of concentration and wisdom. So by the time one has developed that foundation, one is already skilled in those first 4 trainings. They are a part of who you are. Your mind is restrained ethically, restrained from the afflictions and so forth, making the newer trainings of concentration and wisdom much easier to actually cultivate. And then, independence on that foundation, one moves to the trainings of the being of great capacity, where it's the exact same 6 trainings, but here the motivation is completely different. It's that of bodhicitta, and they are now conjoined with bodhicitta. I'd imagine for perhaps all of you, because you have the karmic imprints to come to a place like this, to join a retreat like this, you have imprints that mean when you hear about some of the goals of the Dharma, in particular those such as bodhicitta, or the wisdom realizing emptiness, or perhaps calm abiding, these kinds of goals of the Dharma, when you hear about them, a deep yearning arises. This is the ripening of your imprints from past lives, where you are attracted to this. So my advice for you in terms of your daily practice going away from here is have an honest look at yourself and your capacity in terms of time, available time. For those who have more time, meditate in the sequence of trainings. Focus on the first until you gain transformation, then to the second, and then when you gain transformation, the third. So in the Lamrim, it's presented very clearly the signs of when you have completed the first level and ready for the second, and so forth. So for those who have more time, that is this sequence of training is how you will actually get realization. For those who look at the day and say, I will make time to do meditation, but I'm not going to be able to have it as the dominant activity in my mind throughout the day. That's where I am right now. That's how things are right now. Then what I suggest to you is the meditation I presented yesterday. Do this meditation. Don't go through all the stages because it will just take too much time. So meditate on what I presented yesterday, the sufferings of samsara, giving rise to a wish of, I want to be free of the sufferings of samsara. And then immediately go to bodhicitta. So too do all others. And then you go into the interdependence to develop a sense of affection for others, and then meditate on love, compassion, wholehearted resolve, and bodhicitta. Meditate. So yesterday I presented this meditation in detail. Do that. These imprints will be gaining in strength, will be nourished. And when your opportunity in life changes and you have more time so that you can focus not just to a daily meditation, but throughout your day, keep the topics of the Dharma dominant in your mind, then with those strong imprints, you'll be ready to start at the first level and will progress much more quickly to the second, third, and so forth. So this is my advice to you on how to meditate on what you've learned this week. You decide where in these 2 camps you find yourself, and then you place your attention there in one of these 2 meditation techniques. So just before I translate what Genla said, in case I don't think I emphasized one key point enough of what Genla was saying in that previous segment, where the dividing line for each person is in terms of where to meditate, is if one has enough time in the day to keep one's mind focused on the Dharma. start with the first level until that's accomplished. Where one doesn't have the opportunity to keep the Dharma at the forefront of one's mind throughout the day, then do the meditation as presented yesterday. And in this way, you build up the qualities inside so that when the time comes when you can focus on the Dharma primarily, then you're ready to go to starting at the first level. Now to come to what again I said. So yesterday we came up to the cultivation of bodhicitta, the generation of bodhicitta, the mind of enlightenment. And this, amongst the various motivations behind virtuous activities, there's none that can compare to bodhicitta. Whatever one does with a virtuous motivation leads to the accumulation of merit. But if that virtuous motivation is one of bodhicitta, the merit is incalculable, inestimable. And this can be understood through these 2 points. The goal of the bodhisattva is to benefit each and every single being without exception. So, therefore, there is no greater objects to benefit than that. It's an inconceivable number. It's not just myself. It's not just my loved ones. It's everyone equally so, feeling a closeness to all equally. And then the second reason is that the goal that the bodhisattva has is not a good rebirth. It's not their individual liberation. It's Buddhahood. There is no greater goal to strive for, and there are no greater number of beings to benefit. Therefore, that motivation accumulates the greatest amount of merit. And in one of Nagarjuna's texts, Shantideva, in the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, he uses the analogy of bodhicitta being like an elixir that can transform metal into gold. So when bodhicitta arises in our heart in a way that is uncontrived and lasting, our mind is transformed from something ordinary into the most precious of minds. This is bodhicitta. And with such a mind, then, whatever one does is virtuous. And it's not merely virtuous. It will lead to the greatest accumulation of merit possible. This is the unique characteristic of bodhicitta. The way this elixir of bodhicitta works is that it arises in our mind that is contained within this body of flesh and blood, this body that is subject to the sufferings of birth, aging, sickness, and death. But with this elixir in our heart, this body now has the required cause to be transformed into the flawless body of a Buddha. This is how the elixir of bodhicitta works for our body. The verse from Shantideva's Bodhisattva's Way of Life, again, is quoting from the first chapter, where Shantideva, for about 30 verses, presents the incredible benefits of bodhicitta, so as to moisten the imprints we have and give rise for the yearning to train in the way guided, so that eventually we too become counted amongst bodhisattvas. So this particular verse, the 10th verse, like the finest gold-making elixir, from this unclean body we have taken to a body of a Buddha, a priceless jewel is transformed. Such is bodhicitta, thereby hold it absolutely steadfast. So here this term, a priceless jewel, refers to this mind that the bodhisattva has, this mind of bodhicitta, that can transform this unclean, very ordinary body into the perfect body of a Buddha. Therefore, and Shantideva concludes in the verse, hold it, the mind of bodhicitta, absolutely steadfast. Protect this most precious of jewels. There's a further verse which I'm not finding now, again from the same chapter, about how in order to attain enlightenment, not only does one have to accumulate incredible qualities, which bodhicitta is the most powerful motivation to lead to the accumulation of virtue, bodhicitta also is the most powerful antidote to past non-virtue. It purifies immense amounts of non-virtue. So here in the qualities of bodhicitta that Shantideva praises in the 30th verse, in the first verse, he praises bodhicitta not only as being the greatest of motivations for the accumulation of virtue, but that it also leads to the purification of extensive non-virtue. So we got yesterday as far as building on the meditation of the sufferings of samsara and the generation of definite emergence, to recognizing all others are in the same position as ourselves in yearning for happiness, but are bound for the same reasons as us, and are, even though they may not know it, are desperate to be guided to gain their own freedom. Here one then meditates on the interdependent relationship we have with others, this deep entwined relationship we have with others, that all that we have that's good has come about in dependence on others. Therefore, one develops a sense of tenderness, of closeness, of dearness towards others. Based on that, then, we can develop actual love and compassion for them, wholehearted resolve, and bodhicitta. When bodhicitta arises within oneself, it's abundantly clear there is nothing that is important except for becoming a Buddha in order to ease the suffering of others. This becomes the guiding light of one's life, striving to benefit others in order to become a Buddha, in order to help them ever more. So that's as far as we came yesterday. When bodhicitta arises, that it is the determination to lead all sentient beings to their own liberation from suffering, and to do so, I must become a Buddha. With that having arisen within one will then strive to cultivate the causes that lead to both being able to help others ever more, and in particular to become a Buddha, so that one can help others in the greatest of ways. So what are the trainings that the bodhisattva engages in? Well, these are those same 6 practices that one trains in with a mind of definite emergence. But here, the motivation has been transformed from one of, I have to gain freedom from suffering, to one, I have to lead all beings to freedom from suffering, and therefore I have to become a Buddha. So the motivation is completely transformed, but the practices are the same 6. But the same 6 now have an additional name attached to it, because those same practices are the mind of, say, generosity is now conjoined with bodhicitta. So it's called the perfection of generosity, because of being conjoined with bodhicitta, it will lead to arising in a perfected way in a Buddha. So here the practitioner will, as before, train in generosity, giving of themselves, making offerings to the Buddhas, repaying their kindness, strengthening their connection, making offerings to suffering beings to ease their suffering, strengthen their connection, and that of ethical restraint, which here is primarily guarding their mind from self-interest. That is the primary training, because by the time the practitioner has generated bodhicitta, they have extensive experience of these 6 practices, so they are become ever more refined. Then the training on patience is ensuring one's mind stays undisturbed when one receives adverse reactions from others, as well as adverse reactions from one's own inner turmoil. In particular, fatigue in training, feeling this is too difficult. Being patient with that, not letting this afflicted way of thinking hinder one's motivation. And the fourth training, enthusiastic perseverance, so taking delight in virtue. And then those 2 additional trainings from the prior section, single-pointed concentration, and the wisdom realizing selflessness, or the wisdom realizing emptiness. So here again, it's the same 6 trainings as before, that the new bodhisattva has great experience in, but now are conjoined with bodhicitta. And the final line I addressed earlier when the trainings of the practitioner of intermediate capacity, because for a practitioner striving for their own individual liberation, they too need to abandon grasping. So we look then in brief at if grasping arises, you do not have the view, the fourth line. But we'll look at that more now because it's also a key training for the bodhisattva. Here, so that the fourth line, if grasping arises, so what one grasps at is the self as being self-existent, the mind as being self-existent. In fact, everything that exists, we grasp at it as being self-existent. So this is the ignorance of self-grasping. It's also called the ignorance of true grasping. And without abandoning this ignorance, we will not be able to eradicate the afflictions, because it is the very root cause of the afflictions. And without being able to eradicate the afflictions, liberation and enlightenment cannot be achieved. Therefore, it has to be trained in by both the practitioner seeking individual liberation and the practitioner seeking Buddhahood. So to present the correct view in brief, first, one recognizes that every single object of thought, in other words, everything we think about, everything, whether it's a self, whether it's a particular mind, whether it's something we see or hear or smell, whatever is that object of our consciousness, it appears as if it is self-existent. And we grasp at it as if it is. This is true grasping or self-grasping. But this consciousness is always mistaken, which means nothing exists in the way that it appears to our mind. In other words, every single thought we have is mistaken. We believe that it exists in the way that it appears, but nothing exists in the way that it appears. And when we investigate, we come to recognize it is empty of existing in the way that it appears. And this is the realization of emptiness, the view of emptiness. Nothing exists in the way that it appears. It is all empty of existing in the way that it appears. This is the understanding of emptiness. How to come to know that every object of thought is empty of existing in the way that it appears. How does one come to know emptiness or realize emptiness? The most skillful method is that of dependent arising. There are different ways to present dependent arising. We'll look at it through two ways: being dependent on causes and being interdependent or mutually dependent. So the first, dependency on causes. Just about everything that we will observe is a result, which means it came about in dependence on causes. So just about everything we think of has come about, is a result, then therefore it has come about in dependence on causes. And dependency on causes is something that on a coarse level, a superficial level, we all know and we readily accept. Just ask a gardener if their garden came about in dependence on the flowers, etc., are self-existent, and they say, no, I did a lot of work. I was a major cause of this garden, amongst many other things, amongst many other causes. So on this coarse, superficial level, we understand dependency on causes. A subtler level of dependency, perhaps some gardeners will know, but the majority of us will not know. And that will be known by botanists. A botanist will be able to say, yes, from this seed, this plant will grow. But what is it about this seed? So this seed has various components, and when it meets the right conditions, this will happen within the seed, and that will lead to that happening within the seed, and so forth. So botanists will know the inner workings at subtler level of dependence arising. And similarly, if we take this life that we have, we can say, yep, this body, it came about in dependence on my mum. I was born from my mother. Father played his part as well in my conception. So in dependence on my parents, this body came about. This, again, coarse level of understanding of dependency on causes. But then what about our consciousness, our mind? Where did that come from? And there, a coarse level of dependency is insufficient. a subtler level is required, where one understands that this consciousness came from a previous life and then entered into this body, and it came about or entered into the body at conception, and therefore this body has consciousness. It's a consciousness abides in the body. So that understanding of consciousness coming from a previous life, that is a subtler understanding of dependency on causes. So on a coarse, superficial level, we will all readily agree that whatever is a result necessarily came about in dependence on a cause. And again, with just a little bit of thought, it's very easy to recognize that there's not a single result that is not dependent on a cause. A result necessarily has to have come from a cause. And therefore, if someone who clearly isn't thinking about this will assert that, no, this is self-existent, it does not require a cause, it will be readily easy to disprove that whatever they're referring to is self-existent, exists by way of its own nature. It must have come about independent on a cause. It cannot be independent of causes. So this understanding of dependency on causes is widely accepted, doesn't require much investigation to recognize its validity. The second lens through which we'll approach dependent arising is that of mutual dependency or interdependency. So the Tibetan is literally one thing dependent on another, which is a bit of a mouthful, so I'll rather here use mutual dependency or interdependency. And so this refers to things which do not come about in dependence on causes, but nevertheless are dependent. So for example, there can only be left if there is right. There can only be large if there is small. So this is an illustration of mutual dependency. One can only talk about a large building if there's an understanding that there are buildings not of the same size, that are smaller. And similarly, left and right. We talk about our two hands, and we say, I have a left hand and I have a right hand. But we can only talk about left and right hands because there are two. For example, if you take your pets at home, you won't talk about your dog or cat's left or right tail because dogs and cats only have one. It would be ludicrous to talk about their right tail or their left tail because they only have one. But if they're their paws, you talk about their left and right paw. So there is this mutual dependency that because there is a left, there is a right. If there were no left, there could not be a right. And similarly, each of us says, I am here. But from the perspective of everyone else in the room, you are over there. So self and other, here and there, this too is mutually dependent. If we were alone in the room, we wouldn't talk about others in the room because you'd be alone in the room. So this then is the second way that we'll look at dependency, this mutually or interdependence. So through these two ways to look at dependent arising, that of dependency on causes and mutual dependency, one recognizes that everything that exists, everything we think about, every object of thought, is a dependent arising. Whether it's a compounded or uncompounded phenomenon, or to use other terms, impermanent or permanent, it is a dependent arising. Everything that exists dependently. So this morning, when you're reading the Heart Sutra, the Heart Sutra says many things that without having been taught what is meant seem very strange. When it says there are no eyes, no ear, and so forth, this seems bizarre because, of course, there are eyes, we're looking at each other, and there are ears, we're hearing sound. But so this will make one think, what was Avalokiteshvara going on about? This makes no sense. But when you understand that it's presented in an abbreviated manner, that what is being said is that there are no independent eyes, no independent ears, and so forth. Rather, they are dependent. then it makes complete sense. But the sutra is presented in a particularly abbreviated manner. But the meaning for all those no's are that there is no independence, rather there is only dependence. When one then thinks, well, first recognizing that whatever you are taking as your example, whatever the object of thought is, whatever you're thinking about, it appears as if it is independent. So that's how we naturally relate to it. But when you think about it, it is dependent. And when you keep going through this process, you recognize nothing exists in the way that it appears, independent. Everything is dependent. Everything. When I spoke about this a couple of days ago, I mentioned that all phenomena appear as if they are independent. So taking the self too appears as if it is independent, not needing to rely on anything, but being self-existent. The self appears as if it doesn't need to rely on the body and mind. But when we investigate, we recognize actually it is. It's clearly dependent. But that is not how it appears. So the self, like all phenomena, appears as being independent, not dependent. And then we believe it exists in this way. Again, this all happens at an innate level. We are not going through a thought process that in every moment that I exist truly. Rather, at an innate level, we grasp at, in this case, the self, at every phenomenon as existing in the way that it appears, as existing independently. What we are challenging here is this innate self-grasping or true grasping. That this innate in the sense it naturally arises. We don't need to force it, that we naturally think in this way. And so this comes, as I've said, this applies to everything we think about. We believe that how something appears as independent is how it exists. This relates to everything. But when we investigate by means of dependence arising, we will come to recognize, actually, it appears to me as if it is independent, but it's not. It's dependent on causes and/or it's mutually dependent. Therefore, the way it appears is not how it exists in reality. And this relates to everything. We usually talk about the self, but it's everything we think about. The way that it appears is not how it exists in reality. Appearance and reality are not in accordance. So when we come to this recognition, especially when we do so again and again to a wide number of phenomena, we recognize nothing exists in the way that it appears. It is all empty of existing the way that it appears. Appearance and reality are not in accordance. How things appear are not how they exist. They are empty of existing in the way they appear. This then is the wisdom realizing emptiness. When one gains this wisdom of, let's say, understanding emptiness, the impact is that you come to see that all I'm thinking about is mistaken. In the sense of what I'm thinking about does not exist in the way that it appears. Therefore, this innate true grasping is a wrong consciousness because it's mistaken about how it believes things to exist. It's a wrong consciousness. And therefore, this true grasping or self-grasping is a consciousness of ignorance. The way it believes things to exist is not how they actually exist in reality. Whereas my understanding of emptiness is in accordance with reality. Therefore, it is a wisdom. And as with every single topic of meditation presented, these need to be engaged in repeatedly over a sustained period. The same meditation again and again and again. With every topic of meditation. Why? So that the outcome of that meditation becomes ingrained within. You become habituated to it. This new way of thinking, this correct way of thinking, becomes a part of your natural way of thinking. So too here, by meditating on emptiness repeatedly over a sustained period, one's conviction in the validity of one's understanding grows, and the impact of that understanding on you grows. Then how is this experienced? It's primarily experienced not so much that one's ignorance is weakening, but the afflictions that result from the weakening ignorance. It's these weakening afflictions, it's that you will experience. Your attachment, your anger, your pride, these will be weakening because what you attach to doesn't exist in the way that it appears. You who are attached do not exist in the way that it appears. The mind of attachment itself, it also doesn't exist in the way that it appears. So this understanding, this wisdom, leads to all these wrong consciousnesses weakening. Therefore, one's attachment, anger, pride, so forth, all weaken. And this comes from the weakening ignorance. And by continuing with this meditation, not saying, oh, I've got something on top, fantastic, not being satisfied, not being content, but continuing, eventually the time will come when you realize emptiness directly. Then ignorance and the resulting afflictions and their seeds are being eliminated. And this is when one is rapidly gaining freedom. Again, looking at the Heart Sutra from this morning, there are a couple of lines that are particularly famous. So looking at this expression, form is empty, followed by emptiness is form. So looking at the first, form is empty. So form is the illustration. Form is empty. But let's make it into a sentence. Form is empty of being independent. And this word independence here can be expressed in many ways, but for our purposes, form is empty of being independent. So wherever in the Heart Sutra one sees this negative, no or non, where it's mainly no, it doesn't mean non-existent, but it rather means does not exist in the way that it appears. So in this case, form is empty. It doesn't mean form is non-existent, because emptiness doesn't mean non-existent. It means it's empty of existing in the mistaken way that we believe it does. It's empty of being independent, not it does not exist. So form is empty then means form is empty of being independent. It doesn't mean non-existence. And likewise with all the nons throughout the sutra. Then the second phrase, emptiness is form. So again, this isn't to be taken literally. It's not that emptiness is form. Form is form. A hand or an arm, this is form. It is not emptiness. So then what does emptiness is form mean? It means that the very nature of form is emptiness, in that it is empty of existing independently. So the nature of form is emptiness, not that form itself is emptiness. So therefore, or furthermore, throughout the Heart Sutra, wherever you see a no or non, it doesn't mean it's non-existent, but it means it is not independent. It is, or it's not self-existent. It doesn't exist from its own side by way of its own characteristics. Rather, the way it exists is interdependently or dependent on causes. It is a dependent arising. That's how it exists. It is not independent. So hopefully, in this way, you've come to some understanding of what is meant by emptiness. And this method of dependent arising is the most frequently used method to come to understand the meaning of emptiness or come to realize emptiness. There are many other methods that one can also use to come to understand emptiness, but dependent arising is the clearest. This further illustration of mutual dependency. If you think of your dog at home, you'll ascribe a color to it. You'll say it's a black dog or a white dog or whatever, but that it is of this color is not a characteristic of that dog. Rather, it's merely the color of its fur. It's because the fur happens to be a particular color, we can label that dog, we can call that dog black or white. So therefore, the dog only can be called a particular color, independent on something, independence on the color of its fur. And if you have two identical dogs, one just happens to be black and one happens to be white, if you were to completely shave those dogs so that they are entirely bald, you would not be able to tell which was black or white. You'd have to wait for some fur to grow through. And so this shows the color of the dog is not the dog. It's not in its nature. It's not black or white, independence on its nature, due to its nature rather. It is rather an attribute that can only be labeled on dependence on a valid reason, that it is the color of the fur. Otherwise, if this weren't the case, one would know that that dog is black without being black at all. And that is not the case. The way to cultivate bodhicitta, I think I've presented clearly, training through the three levels. And then when one comes to the third level, one trains in the recognizing the mutual dependency or the interdependency we have with others, love and compassion, wholehearted resolve, and bodhicitta. And then with bodhicitta arisen, one meditates on those 6 perfections of generosity up to wisdom. The way the bodhisattva will meditate on those 6 perfections is in a particular sequence. They'll meditate first on generosity, and then they'll meditate on emptiness in relation to generosity. Then they'll meditate on ethics. Then they'll meditate on emptiness in relation to ethics, and so forth. So in this way, the bodhisattva will meditate on the 6 perfections in a particular sequence, with the preceding ones always being meditated on first alone and then followed by emptiness. And for those who have the opportunity to keep the Dharma at the forefront of their mind, meditate in the way presented, starting where we are at the beginning. For those who do not currently have the opportunity to keep the Dharma at the forefront of their mind throughout the day, then meditate in the way presented yesterday. And if time is limited, I encourage you to meditate nevertheless every day, but sometimes you can make it a little shorter, sometimes a little longer. So meditate on the faults of samsara, so as to give rise to a wish to gain freedom of samsara. This is important not to miss, to meditate on the sufferings of samsara, and then to give rise to definite emergence. Then turn your attention, recognizing all others are in the same position, and through reflecting on our interconnected relationships with them, develop a sense of closeness. If time is limited, then you can just repeat the next stages as a mere expression, love, compassion, wholehearted resolve, and bodhicitta, and then spend a little bit more time on the 4 meditations of generosity, ethics, patience, and enthusiastic perseverance, and then dedicate. But if you have then a little more time, then you can spend more on, say, love, compassion, and so forth. Or you can also spend a bit of time on single points of concentration and the wisdom realizing emptiness. But these 2 really need repeated, perhaps a full-time attention to actually lead to a transformative result. But if from time to time you want to strengthen your concentration, try and hold a Buddha image. And from time to time, if you want to meditate on emptiness, remind yourself, happiness comes about in dependence on causes. It's not self-existent or independent. So too with suffering. And even just that, you can use to spur you to strive in virtue and abandon non-virtue. Remind yourself, I, as well as others, are not self-existent, but we are interdependent. And we do not exist by way of our nature or characteristics, but are empty of existing in this way. So reminding oneself of the presentation on emptiness through reflecting on dependence arising from time to time is beneficial. But if your time is limited, focus on those first four practices rather, as well as then what comes before that. Now the impermanence of our time together is vividly clear. We come right now to the very end of our time together. This opportunity to cultivate virtue is finite, and it is ending. So, like that, we be aware once again of impermanence. And everything that is impermanent is dependent on causes. So we can remind ourselves of dependence arising. And in these times together, right now in this session, we've spoken a bit about dependent arising. So we can take this as our lens to review the retreat very briefly. In each session that you've had here, not just in the teaching sessions, in the meditation sessions, you've accumulated extensive merit. This merit or virtuous karma that you have accumulated is a dependent arising. It didn't just happen. It didn't happen because it has a particular nature. It happened in dependence on many causes. That this very retreat happened required innumerable causes, countless causes. It requires qualified retreat leaders, requires retreatants. So all of us have this interdependent relationship. I could only teach you because you were here wanting to be taught. I could only teach you because of causes I have created. Venerable Tsepel could only lead her meditations in dependence on so many causes she has created. And each of you are only here in dependence on many causes that you have created. But even these creation of causes that each person has individually created didn't come about in dependence on you alone, but interdependently with so many others. Our individual teachers, people in our lives, our employers, and so forth. Moreover, having someone who can lead a retreat and retreatants, that those causes, those innumerable causes are insufficient. You need a place to gather, a place that is comfortable, that is protected from the environment. And for that to come about, there have been decades of causes directly accumulated and countless indirect causes as well. Those who've offered their time, their energy, their financial support to make this place possible and to ensure that it has survived for all these decades. And then we can think in many other ways, but we'll leave at just these clearest ways in how we are interdependent, how we are entwined. Ourselves here as this little group, and through each of us connected to our own larger groups outside, who are all in their own various ways entwined with each one of us individually. In this way, we come to recognize this deep web of interdependency. And that this virtue that we have accumulated now has come about in dependence on so many others. It's not me making everything happen. It's come about in dependence on so many others. So now, in a few moments, we'll come to dedicate. When you dedicate all this virtue, dedicate it to everyone who has been involved in making this retreat possible, those directly and those indirectly. When one really has thought well about dependence arising, that expression of dedicating the merit accumulated in this retreat to all those who made the retreat possible means we are dedicating the virtue to the well-being of every single being. Every single being. The web of interdependency is vast and very fine. So we dedicate that all beings fulfill their potential and become Buddhas. And that all beings strive, ourselves and all others, to quickly fulfill our potential so that we can be of benefit to others. And in this process of fulfilling our potential, may we only ever benefit and never harm, benefit in all ways we can and never harm. And in this process, may all beings live in good health, heal from illness. In particular, may their minds, no matter what they are encountering, be at peace. May all beings live in comfort, free from material distress and emotional distress. May all beings live free of conflict and aggression, whether from others or from arising in their own minds. May all beings live in peace.
Denere, and Denezada, and Jugi Denigi, that young the Samdi Bay, our Chunson, and Begida, Susolia, Semlia, Kawacum, Chitin, Madame, Susana, Nanma, Lord, or during that didn't something, Geshe Yabosaya songs and Begida, Susakawacum, Chitoyadi, Chagorwa, or Denisi, that to share.
I personally want to say a heartfelt thank you to all of you. And I really appreciate the opportunity you have given me by being here. And again, I'm really expressing this not just to those in the room, but broadly. And I encourage you to think in the same way, to recognize this deep web that we have with all beings and rejoice in the good we have done and through our dedication, the good that will come to all. And thank you.
Yeah.